Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to our next episode. Hey, we are doing the autobiography of a yogi line by line. We are in chapter 7, part 4. That means we're finishing chapter 7. And we have a special guest today. We have Padmini on the podcast today. Padmini, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me. Privileged to be here with you both.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Padmini's previous episode was with Ananda, was about Anandamayi Ma, right? And for some reason, that episode is like is probably our most popular episode. Just like shot through the popularity right. In like a week, it had like thousands of views for some reason.
Oh,
we were probably down to you, Padmini, hence you're back. We need our viewership higher.
Anandamayi Ma, definitely.
Yes, very humble.
Was that the Awake movie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. So this is the first time, Padmini, you were on the Autobiography of a Yogi podcast. So we just want to ask you in the beginning, like, when was the first time you read the book and how did it make you feel?
Well, I have an interesting history with this book. Back in the days when I was, partying a lot and just having way too much fun in life. No regrets. But it is past history. My cousin brother tried desperately to save me, and he tried to give me a copy of the Autobiography of a Yogi. And, I looked at it and I was like, nah, no thanks. I'm not interested. Maybe another time, I said to him. And I think he tried to give it to me a few times. And I was always like, no, I'm not interested. Maybe another time is what I kept telling him. But eventually, when I was interested and I went to him to ask for something that I can read, he gave me the Divine Romance instead. He didn't give me the Autobiography of a Yogi. He gave me the Divine Romance. And I can say that book completely changed my life. I mean, it took me months to finish it, just every sentence had a deep, profound impact on me. And the person I am today, or just a person after reading that book and before reading that book, is just completely like opposite ends of the spectrum. And then I obviously got curious about the autobiography because he talks a lot about that book, and I read it and I was like, there's a part of me that didn't have it as really a surprise, any of what I'd read, almost like, I kind of knew it before. It was more like a storybook for me to sort of go along the ride with Paramahansa Yogananda about his life and his experiences, and, something to share with people about, what's actually possible and what actually happens in parts of the world that nobody really knows about or doesn't go viral on social media, or, it's just that there's some amazing things that are happening and that can happen. So that's my experience of the autobiography. And after I read it, it was probably in 2015, maybe 14, something like that I read the autobiography. I haven't gone back and read it since then. So it was very interesting to read it now in preparation for joining you guys. And I'm like, have I read this before? It's so new. Definitely.
Does that mean you reread the whole thing?
No, not the whole thing.
That would be some good level of keenness.
Not the whole thing, but enough to get me more interested, and it's come off my bookshelf now, so I'm going to be reading it more.
Very nice. Mission accomplished, Mike.
Yay. It's one of those books that has so many little stories that it's impossible to remember them all. And I remember reading the autobiography of a yogi in the early 2000s. That was the first time I read it. And I was always proud. Oh, I read the book. I know what it's about. And then people kept telling me, like, you remember this guy from the autobiography? I was like, what? Who? And maybe I should read it again. And up to the point, I mean, now that we're doing this podcast, but also before, I feel also during the pandemic, I got into the habit of listening to the audiobook a lot of the Autobiography of a Yogi. And now I feel like at least every chapter I know kind of what it's about and what's going on in there. But I was really not. It's easy to forget a lot of those stories totally. And including this one here. So like for me, when you hear those kind of names, like the levitating saint is called Bhaduri Mahasaya, right? Or Mahashaya. And then there's also Master Mahashaya, who's a different person. And in my mind, I was mixing them all together. And
then Lahiri Mahashaya.
That's of course Lahiri Mahashaya. So like, are they all related or?
you know, before starting this project, I you know when you ask or someone, you're having a conversation and you're like, oh, did you remember that bit in the book? And if they ask, oh, who was that said that, I'd always be like, oh, I think it was Master Mahashaya. If it wasn't one of our 6 gurus, it was Master Mahashaya. That's my go-to guy. Easy to remember than Bhaduri Mahashaya or Paramahansa or others.
And I think Master Mahashaya was a very profound person in Guruji's life. But as we see in this chapter, so was Bhaduri Mahashaya. He was a person that he sought out often in his life, and he during his whole time that he was in India, Guruji would spend time with Bhaduri Mahashaya. And I guess it makes sense, right? Like he lived his life there, and he would have multiple people. The only thing that's so remarkable about Guruji's life is that he has so many saintly companions, right, everywhere that he can seek out, and he's very humble about it. He doesn't go like, oh yeah, I know this saint and this saint and stuff. He mentions a few of them, and I'm sure he had a lot more profound teachers in his life than he mentions here in the book.
Didn't make the cut.
Anyways, say again?
Those guys didn't make the cut for the autobiography.
They didn't make the cut.
We have to read about them in his other works, like God Talks to the Original or Second Coming, or Divine Romance.
Yes, there's only so many pages in a book that can fit you in there.
600's enough for an autobiography, I imagine.
That's right. So we're at the end of the chapter 7. And it's about Bhaduri Mahashaya, the levitating saint. And the first sentence of the section that we're going through is like that several students put rupees in Bhaduri's slippers. And so they talk about offerings that they make. So monetary offerings to a sannyasi. And it is, Guruji describes this really nicely. He kind of says that it's the Lord in disguise when you kind of give money to a sannyasi, and so it's basically the Lord's way to take care of him.
Yeah, and also refers to friends being lords in disguise, looking after. So when someone helps you out, it's really God helping you out. That's the feeling I get, but in disguise. But this customary offering of putting rupees in people's slippers is not one that in my part of India you would generally do, even though if it is a saint, I don't think, because footwear is like not very sacred, and money, like you can't even put money on the floor or a book on the floor. So to put it in a shoe, even though it's a shoe of a saintly person, I don't know if I haven't been there for a while. I haven't lived there for a while, so I don't know, but I can't remember it being a thing.
Yeah, I would definitely concur on that. But then again, I've never been in the presence of a saint, so I don't know. I mean, I always think about the Sanskrit stotram about Guru Padukabhyam. It's about the slippers, the wooden slippers of the Guru. I can't remember which Guru it was even about, but it's a Guru at the end of the day, right? And that stotram always moves me to tears at the thought of just seeing all the poet saw were these slippers. And he knew at the sight of those slippers that they belonged to his guru, whoever it was. It was just a connection to the slippers, and for me that sort of also goes to say the feet of the master. But I'm not sure that again I would put money into a shoe. But yeah. As I said, I haven't been in the presence of a saint, so I have no idea. Have either of you been in the presence of a saint or a swami? What was your experience?
Yeah, it's quite a profound experience. I've been in the presence of a few, I would say, but it's not something that you can articulate very well in words when you're in that zone, and then you reflect on it. It's something that's quite difficult to express other than through just love and joy when you're thinking about that. But I love that chant, the one that you mentioned, and I think I might find a version to put on the link for listeners. It's quite a popular one in India to get yourself in a state of devotion and offering your love to the Guru. But the other thing I was going to say was, the intention of the offering is obviously to renounce. It's essentially to renounce your material wealth or offer your material wealth into the hands of God. So that's the gesture, but often it's not used in such a high way. That's quite a deep way of thinking about wealth. It's often offering to a guru or even in a temple is often about the conditionality of, okay, I'll give you this, you give me that. So it's, even though it's a high ideal, it's not necessarily the only reason why people do it.
I love those customs. They sound very, I don't know, it sounds very reverential. In the West, this kind of stuff never happens, right? Nobody puts money into someone's slippers, and also the slippers are open, right, in the front and in the back. Like, how do you even, like, I don't. So is it more like he comes back to his slippers and like, oh, there's money here, and then yeah. But it's yeah. I find I like that because it feels it. I mean, you say maybe slippers aren't something that are very held in high regard, but it feels like something very personable, very like I as a gesture. When I saw this, I felt like, oh yeah, this is great.
And even the point about the donation itself, or the offering itself, what it symbolizes. I mean, all my life I've been going to temples and I've been putting some money in Bannaram, we call it in Malayalam, right? I don't even know what the actual word for it is, but you put the money in, and what is it, Priyank?
Dan peti. That's the usual. That's what it's called in temples, and not in Malayalam, in India.
See, that basically just means donation box.
Yeah, that's
and that's what I think of, or that's how I've always thought of until I came to this path. Then I realized that there is a significance of every time I tap my card or the donation or the offertory comes around, it's really take my material wealth from me, because really all I want is the spiritual wealth that you can give me. This means nothing for me. Here you go, have it, take it. It's that kind of a thought that I have now every time I tap my card on that card reader at the center. It's so different from what it was before, whereas it was just a donation for, the upkeep of the temple or whatever.
And it's also in the donation prayer, isn't it? Bless this offering, may it serve to carry thy message of self-realization to truth-seeking souls. So it's also for allowing Guruji to do his work through your donation, which is one of the good ways to help the world and disseminating the teachings of Guruji so it can reach a bit further than it otherwise would.
Yeah.
And then a student comes up to Bhaduri Mahashaya and praises him for having taken the yogic path. And I guess in this context, it says that the yogic path entails to renouncing all wealth, right? And the Bhaduri Mahashaya, apparently he was from a wealthy family and he renounced all that wealth to go on the spiritual path. And this is something that he has done, and many other saints. We can name a whole list of them. Yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, being influenced by this and, all the vows of poverty that, Gandhi promoted for satyagrahis. When I was younger, I always thought I should not allow myself to be wealthy. Before I get wealthy, I should donate and force myself to live in somewhat poverty. And I always thought that, if I do get serious, even if it's not, to join in a monastic, formally as a monastic or whatever, I will have to live extremely frugally and very simply, and not in a type of place that I live right now, more of a very, very simple dwelling, 1-bedroom type thing, and some nomadic tribe type, feel. But I always had this impression. Thankfully, it's changed now. But that's that. Then I always felt that I'd feel guilty for accumulating wealth when so few, so many in the world are in need of it.
This was one of the things I struggled with before I read The Divine Romance, because, I was at this point, or I think it was a little bit after that, because reading The Divine Romance rekindled my childhood ambition, but I wanted to become a monk when I was a kid, right? Early teenage and things like that. And everyone laughed at me, and it just went the way it went. But when I read this book, I got really present to, this, I guess, past life thing that I had with me of wanting to become a monk. But at the same time, I was like, I also want to, I can't remember what it was, but it was a conversation. I think I just quit my job and I was looking for a different opportunity, and I was, trying to focus on creating the wealth, but at the same time, this dilemma of material success versus spiritual success was a big one for me, and I keep sort of the thing that made a difference for me from Guruji's teachings on that was the story of Krishna, and how he relates the story of Krishna. I can't remember in which book or in which writing, about Krishna being a king and, having all of this material wealth and everything he could possibly want. However, that didn't keep him materially minded. He was still, in the recognition of everything is from God and is God. And there's something in one of the writings that basically says, just because people think that you can't have spiritual success if you have material success, but material success is equally spiritual success, because at the end of the day, it's all spiritual, everything, all that wealth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of us went through those same thoughts, right? Because when I grew up, I also thought it would be so holy to be poor, and it's really not the goal to be poor. I think I think even if you follow spiritual principles, you're more likely than not going to be successful in life, and with that comes some sort, at least enough to sustain yourself well, right? And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's a medieval idea, or that like having having money is like seen as like an unholy thing. But yeah, I think there's definitely a balance to strike, right? Like if you live only for money or only for material success, and money has that tendency, right? The more you get, the more it sucks you in and gets you busy into ways that are not spiritual. That's definitely the path into delusion, right? That's what we don't want.
I would also think that Guruji really takes care of all your material needs as soon as you pledge your allegiance to him. Because let's face it, even though it may be difficult and really uplifting to live a frugal lifestyle, it may, if you're working 12-hour shifts, that may mean that you're not able to meditate, an hour or 2 hours a day. But if if lots of things are taken care of for you, then you can very easily dedicate more time and energy and focus to your practices. So I always find that when I reflect, as soon as, because I don't come from a very, very wealthy family at all, single parent family, and as soon as I came into this path and I started putting more emphasis on Guruji's way of living and meditation and stuff, all these other things started just falling in line for me. Just just even getting the grades. When I was very young, my grades are really atrocious, and then somehow they became pretty good, even though I don't think I had the intellectual capability to attain some of the results that I did. It somehow just fell into place. And then similarly with career and my marriage and things like that. So I feel like Guruji kind of like, if you accept him, then he then makes you part of it. So then it's easier for you to then follow his teachings. And material wealth is obviously very beneficial in a lot of ways, and especially in terms of not just practicing, but also what you can do for Guruji as well. Because there's one thing when you're volunteering, you can do one thing, like if you might be limited in some ways, because like if you have this small responsibility and you do it really well, you might have to ask for expenses, for example. But personally, I don't ask for expenses. So if I have to go to the shops and get something, I'll just not even a second thought. And like that's aside from donations that come out of my salary, for example. So like it allows me to volunteer without any restrictions. Like we had a concert, Christmas concert once, and the food, we provided food, and we were supposed to get that money back from donations, but very few people donated for the food. And then my wife was like, just make it part of your donation. I was all right, fine. But if I'm in a position where I can do that. But if other people were in that position, then they might have actually not had that program, right? They might have closed that program because we're not getting the donations that we need to. So it's like Guruji allows you to express your devotion in different ways, and especially when he removes the hindrance of material wealth, if you're in that blessed position to have that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good example, Priyank. And you're exactly right. I think Guruji kind of gives you those opportunities, and it's, in some sense, it's always a blessing to have those opportunities, right? To serve him, to be in that kind of environment. So it kind of goes both ways, I would say. And Bhaduri Mahashaya, funny enough, he explains it in a similar way. Like after being praised by his student, he kind of says, he gives him a rebuke. He says, what am I really renouncing? I'm renouncing like those toys of the world, but in return, I got the whole kingdom of God and everything, right? So he makes it sound like the people who renounce God are the real renunciants, because they're really missing out on something big there.
It's such a profound way of looking at wealth, isn't it? And renouncing wealth. You just wouldn't think it's such an original take on it, isn't it? And it's so beautifully expressed. And he says, like, I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How then have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Again, some clues for us. And it's like he asks the rhetorical question, is that sacrifice? The short-sighted worldly folk are verily the real renunciants. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys. As beautiful as this is, and something that we can we can very easily just parrot if we memorize this line. The problem that you face is in our practices we've pledged to go on this path without any expectation of spiritual experiences and rewards. And the spiritual experience here he describes as unparalleled divine possession. Now, if you're going to spout this philosophy to someone on the street, they'll say, well, I've never experienced this unparalleled divine possession, and I've never experienced some of the stuff that Guruji talks about. So how do I know that it's not all just fibs? So I don't know how you tackle that problem. For us, it's not so much a problem because we've overcome that doubt, I suppose, by entering into this guru-disciple unconditional relationship. But someone that's not in that, or that's very much living in a conditional way, which is pretty much the rest of our earthly lives, isn't it? How do you tackle that, Mike?
It's a really good point of view that I haven't taken before, to be honest. It's like when somebody is materially rich, he kind of shows you his fancy car and his new house or something and his private jet, and it goes like, "See, I made it. Look how great I am now. Look at me." And when you have those inner experiences, the tendency would be to keep them to yourself, right? And to not share any of that. And that way you don't create the kind of hype around it that should be there. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why some saints sometimes do miracles, just to wake people up a bit, in the sense that there is more out there.
There's an old Hindi movie, and there's these warring brothers who, one of them is really successful. I've got this, I've got that. What have you got? The other one goes, "Hamare paas maa hai." Meaning that I have our mother. Our mother is with us, and it just made me laugh. I just remember that movie. But this whole thing about the example that you said, and on all of these materially minded people. I say that I don't know if it came across like it sounds like, those people.
The way the other side live.
That's not how I meant it, but like those who recognize the importance or attach the importance to the wealth versus those who have the wealth but do not attach the importance to it, versus those who do not have the wealth. I think there's so many different, I think sometimes I feel like it's easy for me to say that, I don't want this wealth because, God give me the spiritual wealth because I've got enough, and it's sometimes I do wonder that if I was in a place where, I wasn't as blessed from a financial point of view, would I would I still feel that way? Would I still say these things? Because I can definitely understand the, I say understand the unparalleled divine possession, right? I can imagine what that might be like. And I am very happy to, be the chicken or the egg, because I know one of them has to come first, right? In order to get there. Whereas someone who says, how do you know any of it is true? Well, it is really a chicken and egg situation, because you don't know any of it is true. But it's easier to say, I think, if you have some, I don't know. That's what do you guys think about that?
True. Nice analogy. But for most of us who have pledged to do these practices of meditation daily and things like that, we get little nuggets, don't we? It's like a breadcrumbs, the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs along the path, and we experience those joys, and we kind of know. Guruji's described what's at the end, that beautiful house made of cake and biscuits and stuff. But Guruji's described it, but we also get we've had little tastes of it along the way, right? So he's described it and we've had some small tastes. So then for us, this sentence just hits home. But for someone that's reading the autobiography for the first time, without meditating, without having gone through some of these experiences, then I think this kind of sentence will just stay in the subconscious, in some realm of the psyche. And then when they come back and they've had some taste, and then this paragraph will mean infinitely more than it did back then.
It definitely made me laugh.
You got to be in the right frame of mind as well. And like I like how Padmini in the beginning described how she liked to go to parties and stuff. And I remember I grew up with SRF parents, and when I was a teenager and they told me about meditation, I was not very interested. This was not something that I felt would ever play a big role in my life. And then I was completely wrong, but that's because you gotta be in this mind space as well. You gotta be ready for this. And so in that sense, I like everybody's life is different, and so I think some people there's the funniest stories out there of people who find it very late in their life and completely change their lives. So it's really, really hard to tell. That act of renouncing wealth is something that's pretty common among saints. Like there's so many examples. Like we talked about Mirabai in the last part. I think she was either from a really wealthy family or she was a princess. I don't remember. And she renounced that. Saint Francis of Assisi was like the son of a rich merchant who basically owned the whole town, and he kind of gave all of his wealth away that his father tried to bestow on him, gave it all to the beggars. And we can also mention Rajasi Chanakananda, who was a very independently wealthy man who then donated most of his wealth to the work of Paramahansa Yogananda and made a lot of things possible. He bought the Encinitas Hermitage, for example, among other things. And I think he gave a big donation for Guruji's journey back to India in 1935. So there's a lot of, and in those situations, I feel like you're so blessed, right? You have this role in life that you can enable a saint to carry out his mission, right? So Buddha, in that sense, well. It's Buddha, exactly. And I think there's many more that I have left out.
What about the inverse?
What I find funny.
What about the inverse, where someone retains their wealth, but for noble pursuits, there's some
maybe Sri
examples.
Yukteswar can be named a little bit like that. Spoiler alert. But he inherits wealth and he uses it to be financially independent. So he didn't want to be dependent on gifts from devotees because he's a very candid guru. He says it as it is. And so he wanted to be financially independent, which is his way. I'm sure there's also many more. I don't know if you could think of any.
There's Ashoka, who was pretty good, and there's who's that? Padmini. Who's that one in the Mahabharata? It begins with S, I think, something like that. But anyway, there are some others in Indian scripture as well.
The explanation. Oh yeah.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I'm curious about what one renounces when one isn't blessed with wealth to get on this path. Is there a renunciation?
Ego.
Desire.
Friends, yeah. Some friendship circles. It's also just this pretty much the first couple of chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is about this. Your previous friends, i.e. the sense inclinations, you have to renounce them, and it seems like it's going to be some huge sacrifice, but obviously it's for the greater good. And then those friends fight very hard. They try and trick you and remind you that no, that's the fool's gold on that side. But you obviously fight those inclinations and hopefully overcome.
Very interesting. He called them friends.
Yeah, he did. So he literally that's the analogy that he uses in the first 2 chapters in the God Talks with Arjuna.
And when Bhaduri Mahashaya explains why he feels like he is doing the right thing by renouncing physical material wealth for the spiritual kingdom, it makes Mukunda laugh, because Mukunda says he kind of turns the argument around. He kind of says now every saintly beggar is now actually this wealthy. He calls them Croesus, or he puts the cap of Croesus on them. And while all those rich people who are so proud, they are the martyrs. They are the one who give up so much.
Croesus is I didn't know about this saying, the cap of Croesus, before, so I had to research it. These is one of the many references and sayings that when you read the autobiography, you just be like, yeah, I kind of get what that is. I get what he's trying to say. But if you researched every single thing in the book, I dare say it would take you a decade, if not more, to read the book. And that is pretty much why we're doing the podcast. So we should say, Mike, who Croesus is. He's this ancient king from the Greek times, and he was renowned for having exuberant amount of wealth and gold, and hence so much so that he became a figure of myth, and in the sense that people just referenced him and his infinite wealth, even though he probably didn't have that much wealth, but he became that famous that you're as rich as Croesus, or in this case, donning the cap of Croesus.
Yes. Maybe you should bring it back. Maybe it's just something that people used to say and got lost a bit. Yeah. And then Guruji comments on this, and he says that the divine order arranges our future better than any insurance company could do. And in that sense, he then goes on and he says that a lot of people are actually looking for security in this outer world, and they get disappointed by it, and they kind of he has this sentence which is like, their bitter thoughts are like scars on their foreheads, which kind of shows some compassion of his as well for people who are out in this world and they try to create a good life and they keep getting disappointing results.
Yeah. Doesn't bode well for Harry Potter then. He's got a colossal colossal insecurity, poor chap.
But he killed Lord Voldemort accidentally.
This I initially didn't actually understand this line. The world is full of uneasy believers in an outward security. But thankfully, before this podcast, we ran this through the churner in terms of thinking about it, and I think we sort of agreed that when essentially when negative energies around people or negative qualities isn't just quality, it's sometimes physically or astrally manifests, that you can see it, and we sometimes call this like an aura or a vibe. And when someone's like very easily like angry or easily jealous, or all these qualities that we don't like to be around, we can see it around them, and hence I think this is what he's referring to. Their bitter thoughts are like scars on their foreheads. See, these are all the believers in the world of the outward security world, believers.
Yeah.
I think in the astral plane, Guruji mentioned somewhere that people can actually read each other's thoughts, or at least parts of them. And so I'm guessing when saints go through our world, they kind of are like that. They see us, and they don't just see our outer appearance; they also see our thoughts. And maybe that's why he says like scars on our foreheads, because they kind of get what's going on in our minds, what we're thinking about, and then maybe you could call it like a mind that has scars because it keeps thinking about bad experiences or something like that.
Yeah, keeps worrying and looking for security outside. And they can never find that external, we can never find that external security. My friends and family sometimes laugh at me saying, I'm a bit reckless, or like, shouldn't you check this and check that and do this and do that and make sure it's all fine? I'm just like, Guruji will take care of it, I don't need any insurance. Guruji's got it.
We could be completely wrong if we stretch this Harry Potter analogy. He could have just literally predicted, one of the most influential books in 100 years' time, the Harry Potter series, and he could be literally physically talking about the outward security and dark magic, and also the scars being literally Harry Potter's scar. Alternative view. Discuss.
Very literal.
Yeah. That would be a good Satanga question. Like, did Guruji actually mean that, or were they talking about actual scars?
Well, Bhaduri Mahasaya,
yeah.
And levitating as well. They need flying around on brooms and things like that.
Yeah,
levitation
without broomsticks. Yeah. I wonder. Do you think in the higher ages they play Quidditch when they're all levitating?
I think we have to renounce bad jokes.
Oh, Padmini, she's killed us, Mike. No more. She's done the Avila trick now.
Yeah. Thankfully, somebody getting us back on topic. We have this last sentence is actually pretty great. That kind of brings it home. It says, "The one who gave us air and milk from our first breath knows how to provide day by day for his devotees." that's kind of the essence of everything. It's not easy, because I think as humans we have at least we have the desire to have control, and this is the opposite, right? This is complete surrender.
It's such a profound line, isn't it? But Padmini just did like mind blowing. And previously, in jest, you said, when your family mock you, and you said Guruji will provide, and you mentioned insurance, and it's mentioned here as well. But it's a serious question, isn't it, for us? How much do we put our faith in God as opposed to prudent insurance policies and life insurance and all that, travel insurance and health insurance and all that kind of stuff? Obviously the Self-Realization Fellowship answer to this would be, you must take care of your affairs. This is not something literal for us to follow and not have any precautionary measures, but it's true, isn't it? If you do wholly put your faith, but I suppose that's the trick, isn't it? We don't wholly live by this. It's like it's something that we say, but then we have our little nest egg somewhere, and we have our little protectionary measures. And like, for example, if you became a monk or a sannyasi, you have to. One of the vows is that you relinquish your attachment and your wealth previous, right? And that's literally for this purpose, so you then wholly place your devotion and etc. to God.
Yeah, I mean, we have a saying about in Malayalam, my mother tongue, which says, "You do your half, God will do His half." And there's always a question for me, a bit of a gray area as to where does my half end? Should I do, maybe 60% just to hedge a bit against, the half? But I mean, if you just think of that baby that is born and, is just taken care of by God through the mother or whoever, it's just mind-blowing to think of it like that, and to think that if you were constantly that baby with Divine Mother, what that might look like in life on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was always thinking of that cutoff point as well. I asked brother Bhaktananda that once. It's like, how do I know I did all like I needed to do? And then brother Bhaktananda he gave those easy answers. He was like, you do all you can do, and then leave the rest to God and don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, okay, but that's kind of easy to say, but it kind of means there's no cutoff point really. You just always keep struggling and hope that God will help you get there. I always think of me of like a chess piece on a board, and God will just pick me up, put me there once I need to get there. And I don't know what the percentages are. I feel like the percentage of my doing versus God is more like, I don't know, a pretty low number, but at least it's not.
Certainly this sentence has got my red marker out. So Padmini, I've got a red marker for my favorite quotes in the autobiography, and this is one of them. It's just so moving, isn't it? We can't exalt it enough, and it's so comforting in the sense that if for people that worry about future and relationships and security and all that kind of stuff, it's just so comforting, isn't it? Like, for example, we're not my wife and I, we're not going to have children, and one of the common Indian, well, actually anyone would say this, or who's going to look after you when you're old? And I just want to have memorized this line and just parrot it exactly in this fashion whenever anyone says anything of that sort.
I just also recalled a lot of Buddhist monks are not vegetarian, right? And for me, it's like if you're a monk, you're a vegetarian. But a lot of Buddhist monks aren't vegetarian. And the reason for that is that if God gives them meat or pork or whatever, they'll eat it. It's just that they 100% rely on God in the form of people when they go from house to house asking for alms and yeah, if it's meat, it's meat. And that's just as much from God as anything else is.
We related that story of Adi Shankaracharya. Both, I think, Padmini, you were there for the service that I mentioned it in, but also in the previous podcast we talked about that story of Shankaracharya, who on one occasion ate meat, and then there was a nice, beautiful moral of the story later on, but we won't go there. It's where we already discussed it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Guruji goes on. He says he continued to go to Bhaduri Mahashaya's house, and he aided him to attain Anubhava. And then, of course, I didn't know what Anubhava was until I asked Priyank. He told me it means the perception of God.
Direct.
And direct perception, not indirect. Yes. Yeah.
The only reason, the only reason I know that is in 2 pages previous. The saint asks him, "Have you often go into the silence, but have you developed Anubhava?" And all of that is direct perception of God. And here, then he says, "The saint aided me to attain Anubhava," which is a very nice.
Anubhava actually in my mother tongue kind of means experience, like a happening, almost kind of usually in the connotation of suffering, less so in the context, I guess, of divine perception, but I guess it could be related in that context with the exact same word. It's just it's not used in that context very often.
Padmini, tell listeners where your mother tongue, which part of India you're referring to.
I'm from Kerala, the south of India. Malayalam is my mother tongue.
Very good. Padmini was telling me off the other day for pronouncing the bar in her name. And she said, I should know better how to pronounce her name. I was like, yes, I should. But Padmini, tell us what Padma means then.
Padma is lotus. And Padma means lotus flower. And Padmini is the one who is seated in a lotus flower, which is goddess Lakshmi.
Beautiful.
Oh, very nice name. And since he aided him, Bhaduri Mahashaya aided Yogananda to attain Anubhava, that's actually a really big deal, right? That is something that is like usually your guru does for you. And he did, and he describes it as well. But that was basically one of his teachers, and he had a very profound influence on his life that way. Yeah, Priyank?
Yeah, and he also adds in the words, with silent zeal, he aided me.
Mm.
I was wondering what that would mean. I thought it could mean that there was no outward like initiations or like touching of the forehead, or as Sri Yukteswar did to Guruji, like prodded him in the chest, and then he had his samadhi experience. So I thought that's what it could mean. I was wondering if anyone else has got any ideas, please do share.
Could it also mean that without Mukunda knowing it, that he was like working his magic in the background while he was doing other things, without revealing himself to Yogananda as I am like helping you to find God, but he just helped him anyways, possibly.
Nice.
Padmini?
I would like to think that that's what Guruji does with us now. You know, whatever Bhaduri Mahashaya did with him.
Yeah, definitely. With me, he's very patient. And I mean, for us with the guru, we have this kind of relationship where we feel like we we do what we can, and we pray to him to help us. But yeah, I feel like so many times in my life where I do something and I don't think of Guruji, and how it works out, I later think, oh my God, Guruji must have helped me here, otherwise it would have never worked. In that sense. Yeah. And then Yogananda, he goes, he does his own, spoiler alert, he goes way further in the story, and already goes to the point where he goes to America, which is a few chapters ahead in the book. And he says that when he went, he actually visited Bhaduri Mahashaya one more time and told him about his plan. And Bhaduri Mahashaya, he was very supportive, and he told him, son, you go to America. And he says this sentence, he says, take the dignity of Hori India for your shield. Victory is written on your brow. The noble distant people will well receive you, which is very poetic and very beautiful thing to say. And I especially thought about the dignity of Hori India will be your shield. This kind of shows that he might go into a place where there might be adversaries, where there might be people who doubt him, but like the greatness of the Indian legacy is kind of your weapon in this fight, and you will succeed. That's kind of how I understood this. I don't know about you guys.
That's true. And I also got hints of patriotism there. Dignity of Hori India, two good words. Guruji always interweaves, his patriotic feelings towards India. So even more so when saints he's met also share that same feeling and outwardly express it. So he's repeated it there, and it's coincidentally just a couple of days ago we had Indian Independence Day, which we celebrated in our own way here at home. So that's quite a happy coincidence there. The other thing I really liked was that he's written, victory is written on your brow. And that is such a moving saying, isn't it? Imagine if a guru said that to you, you'd just be like, you'd just melt, wouldn't you? You'd not exist. You'd just disappear at that moment. But I really like it so much, but I think I could also use it in my own. So I might encourage people one day and just repeat this line. I wonder how they'd take it.
When I heard that phrase, they take the dignity of Hori India for your shield, I had to Google what Hori meant. And there were, a couple of different meanings, but I went with the old and graying and sort of ancient strength, if you will, grayness. And then I just had this image of Guruji like Captain America with this shield. And in the shield, like, are all of these old sages and saints of India, like all of them with him as he heads to America, like representing every one of those old ancients of India. It was just such a cool image in my head that popped up. It's like, go on, Guruji, we're all behind you.
And I'm sure that's how it was, because he kind of had all the blessings of all of those people when he went there to America. And it was, as we see later, it was all necessary, right? He needed all those blessings to get this message of Indian spirituality over to America and establish an organization. Yeah. And this is where chapter 7 ends, with those words of Bhaduri Mahashaya. There is one more rather long, not super long, I would say medium long footnote about levitating saints. And it's interesting because they give two they give two examples in there. They give Saint Joseph of Cupertino and Saint Therese of Avila, who were both known to be levitating, both Christian saints, and lived hundreds of years ago. They had different kind of roles in what they were playing. Like Saint Joseph, for example, he was always in this blissed out state that Guruji describes it as uniquely unqualified for work. and then he would randomly start levitating, and then there's the story where people describe how he only needed to be reminded of God by something that he would see, like a statue of Jesus or something, and then he would just take the statue and fly with it to the ceiling. And so he was in that kind of state. And Therese of Avila was more a very, very, very dedicated to her work and very hard worker. But also there are stories where people saw her levitating. Cupertino, by the way, I was like, oh, Cupertino, great, that's here in California, but it's not. It's a different Cupertino. There's one in the south of Italy, in the Puglia region, and today it's called Cupertino, and that's where Saint Joseph lived in a monastery. And I was wondering what role levitation plays in your spiritual development, if that's just one of the stages. Once you reach a certain stage of realization, your body just doesn't want to stay on the ground anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to make do with experiencing this state in dreams. Padmini, whilst preparing for this chapter, whilst preparing for it, I had a really, really cool dream where during meditation, I just started floating and away from my meditation chair.
But are you sure that was a dream?
Well, are you sure we're not currently dreaming? Dream within a dream, within a dream, within a dream. Something that about the Saint Joseph line here, he says that exhibited a worldly absent-mindedness that was really a divine recollectedness. That's a good line, divine recollectedness, because we've, Padmini, you won't know, but there's many times up to now, about 7 times, where different personalities in the book, everyone from like his father to the police officer to Shastri Mahashai to Paramahansa Yogananda, they've all had this moment when they're thinking about profound experiences in their lives. They go silent and withdrawn, and so we've called it through one of our listeners. We've called it the interiority moment, and this is perhaps another good way to describe it.
Yeah. And
I liked Mike's term for it as well. Like, he was so blissed out. Dude, he was blissed out, man. I love it.
Exactly. I think that's exactly how he felt. The Therese of Avila, she wrote an autobiography.
Before we go there,
yeah.
The story with Saint Joseph, where he, it was quite funny, where his brothers wouldn't let him serve properly because it just starts floating along with the crockery, and apparently it's quite a funny thing, isn't it? But also that. The next line is that often the sight of the holy statue was enough to exalt Saint Joseph into vertical flight. Two saints, one of stone and the other of flesh, would be seen circling together in the upper air. So would that imply that his devotion was such that not only would he lift off the ground and defy gravity, but the object of his affection, which is this statue, would also take off, because he's saying that they would be seen circling together in the upper air, which is quite a thought, isn't it?
They dance Viennese waltz or something up in the air. They circle. Yeah.
Maybe he goes into the statue, and then him and the statue are one.
Very nice. Mike, funny you went to the waltz. I would have gone more to a ballet type feel.
Okay, that's your style.
I think because you're trained ballroom dancer. I think that's why you went to the waltz.
Are you?
And I'm from Vienna. Yeah, I'm from Vienna as well. So went to the Viennese waltz straight. Yeah.
Oh.
So predictable. Yeah. And then, but the ballet works well. Imagine you play like the music of Swan Lake in the background, and then you see them both dancing on the ceiling. I think that would work really well.
Exactly what I was thinking of. That's such a divine, that's Tchaikovsky's pieces that are just so divine, aren't they? They're just so uplifting, especially some of them are just really airy, just work so wonderfully with ballet. That's probably why it's the most famous ballet.
Nice. So now we can go to Therese of Avila and her experience of levitating, because she is she wrote in her autobiography how levitation felt, or how that moment felt. Priyank called it the interiority moment. She can give us a first-hand account of this. Padmini, do you want to start reading?
Yeah, sure. In the words of Saint Therese of Avila from her autobiography, these effects are very striking. One of them is the manifestation of the Lord's mighty power, as we are unable to resist His Majesty's will, either in soul or in body, and are not our own masters. We realize that, however irksome this truth may be, there is one stronger than ourselves, and that these favors are bestowed by Him, and that we, of ourselves, can do absolutely nothing. This imprints in us great humility. Indeed, I confess that in me it produced great fear, at first a terrible fear. One sees one's body being lifted up from the ground, and although the spirit draws it after itself, and if no resistance is offered, does so very gently, one does not lose consciousness. At least I myself have had sufficient to enable me to realize that I was being lifted up.
The majesty of Him who can do this is manifested in such a way that the hair stands on end, and there is produced a great fear of offending so great a God, but a fear overpowered by the deepest love, newly enkindled, for one who, as we see, has so deep a love for so loathsome a worm that he seems not to be satisfied by literally drawing the soul to himself, but will also have the body, mortal though it is, and befouled as it is, as is its clay by all the offences it has committed. Guruji really does like Saint Teresa of Avila, doesn't he? He uses, I think this is there's two more significant mentions of Saint Teresa coming later in the book.
It's so interesting that in his footnote he says that she found it very disconcerting and she tried lots of things to resist it and to anchor her down.
It also says here that I don't know, Mike, have you been to this Saint Teresa's crypt?
No, I have not. No.
It says that her body manifests incorruptibility. This is the first mention of incorruptibility, first of a few mentions. Sri Yukteswar was another mention, I think, and also himself. I think the forest lawn, several cemetery people. Coroners, they had a report where Guruji's body was displayed signs of incorruptibility. So yeah, this is an important word for us in the sense that it shows that saints have transcended all physical limitations, and their bodies are literally holy. And this is one of the reasons why saints in India are buried and not cremated like us mere mortals.
I did not know that saints in India are buried and not cremated.
In some traditions, obviously. And a lot of the time they're actually left as they're left in their samadhi, where they take their mahasamadhi, in their lotus posture. They're left, and it becomes a sacred site.
So where is Guruji's physical body now?
Mike?
It's in Forest Lawn in Glendale here, and for now it's said to be not corrupted. So maybe one day we will be able to see it on display. But for now, it is in a closed tomb, so you can meditate in front of it, but you can't really see it.
What is this? A rumor that I've heard that you said that they're trying to move it to Mother Center or something?
There was an attempt to do this maybe 10, 15 years ago, and there was all kinds of resistance to it. But so right now, I haven't heard anything recent.
Is that resistance in SRF or resistance by like the district people?
No, I think it was mostly about creating a big shrine on Mount Washington, which is a very residential area. Yeah.
Oh, that resistance. Okay. So as a community, we would all be for it, but as a physical community in Mount Washington area, they would not be up for it.
Yes, that's how I understood it.
Fascinating. I did not know that.
Yeah. So I would say this concludes our chapter 7. Is that still time for some reflections, Priyank?
Yeah, just one other thing. The footnote said that his name is Nagendranath Bhaduri, and a mutt was made after who passed, etc. And you can go visit his house or the monastery that was made, can't you? It's near Garpar Road, so you can, if you're going there, you can go there. Mike, I think you said you've been. It's
yes,
it's quite nice. But mutt is like a established ashram residence, and there's many very popular and famous ones in India. The most famous one is probably Badrinath, where Shankaracharya established the mutt there. And the Guru Paduka Stotram is actually written by Adi Shankara. So there's a interesting dovetail there for us. In terms of reflections, firstly, I was sad that my dream of flight didn't persist. It was a one-off affair. I think somewhere I've read that dreams of flight is quite a spiritual dream to have as an interpretation. So it's quite nice to have it whilst going through it. But I didn't have any more, unfortunately. Maybe I will after this. The other thing I was going to say was, so with silent zeal, he, this Saint Bhaduri Mahashaya, he helped Mukunda attain Anubhava. So why was there no inclination for Mukunda to accept Bhaduri Mahashaya as his guru, do you think? He was obviously very fond of him, but seemed did that not come up, do you think, in conversation? It's obviously all conjecture.
I like in other instances, Mukunda made a real point of why he didn't accept someone as a guru, right? And I feel like this chapter, that was less the case. So on the contrary, he actually kept praising Bhaduri Mahashaya, and he played a really big role. And like we said, he even played a role in him experiencing Anubhava. But he also kept mentioning that he has visions of his guru already, right? So he has this kind of moment when he actually meets his guru, he recognizes him from the vision. So he basically knows exactly who he is looking for. And I guess this didn't happen when he met Bhaduri Mahashaya. That's what I would say.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, he doesn't express. You're absolutely right. He doesn't explicitly say yay or nay or why he doesn't, as he did with Bhaduri Mahashaya. No, not Bhaduri. He did with Swami Pranavananda, because he said, I felt a resistance, and then the saint then felt resistance and then started talking about Lahiri Mahashaya to ease his reservations. The other thing I reflected on for this chapter is that there's much less magic in terms of what's the word? Miracles, much less miracles than the chapter would suggest. And I thought there would be more of that, but there wasn't. I thought he may have described it, but he didn't. Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, it's called The Levitating Saint. So I was thinking maybe he would start describing his levitation in great detail, how he starts levitating around him. But it seemed like that they had a really good rapport that was not just outer rapport, but also inner, right? That they would have a real spiritual understanding, or maybe even recognize each other from another life or something. This felt like a connection on a deeper level than, let's say, the Tiger Swami or Swami Pranavananda.
Good you mentioned Tiger Swami, because the Tiger Swami and the Levitating Saint, these are great authors' tricks to pull the listener in, isn't it? And because especially with the Tiger Swami, there's so many people just flick straight to that chapter because one's imagination goes wild when imagining Swami. That's a tiger. That's also a Swami. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Overall, I thought it was a very fascinating chapter, much sweeter and much more subtle than the title would suggest, and much more so than I remembered the first few times that I'd read it, and never obviously in this much detail as we have in the last 4 weeks. So looking ahead, has anyone got any more reflections on chapter 7 before we look ahead? Next chapter is much more down to earth, but quite important. Chapter 8 is the India's great scientist J.C. Bose, and this one has got some very, very it's unique in the sense that it's pretty much almost completely scientific, but it's also science, physical sciences, I should say, commingled with patriotism as well. But the physical sciences also go into the realm of a bit of metaphysics as well. Mike?
Yeah, both of those things that you just said, they're very beautifully expressed in there. Guruji had a real love for science as discovering God's creation and how it works. And me, as someone who likes to read about science and about technology, this was really something felt soothing, because when you go on the spiritual path, you feel like, oh, I need to let go of all of this. But there's a place for that in some sense. And also, like you said, the patriotism and the kind of, how he says it, the mind or the Indian tendency to critical thinking is very useful in scientific discoveries. And he mentioned some ancient universities, and very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Also, Mike, you're not allowed to take any time off for the next few weeks because we need your brain on this one.
Because I'm an engineer.
I'm sure your degree was Bachelor of Science, was it not, Mike?
It was.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. But also intermingled was as Mike mentioned, the Indian knack for introspection and critical thinking, and the Western knack for material. Also of subjecting everything to testing, scrupulous testing. So he's essentially describing the best of the best blend of person is in that, and so it's quite nice. And in this episode we talked about insurance, literal monetary insurance, and in the next chapter we're going to talk about capitalism and commercial protectionism. You wouldn't think that would have a place in this book, but you would be wrong. So on that note, we'll thank Padmini. Hopefully you can join us again. And thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Priyank. Jai Guru.
Thank you, Jai Guru.